Welcome to UFO Warning. I'm doing this as a follow-up to the podcast today. It's late here. In the middle of a thunderstorm, you might hear a few lightning crashes, but I just didn't think I could do this subject justice without posting a few pictures and some maps. Now, you've probably heard about the discovery that they believe the altar stone at Stonehenge was actually dragged down there from up in the Orkney Islands. Now you say that and you think, well, maybe. But the more you look into this, the stranger this whole thing gets. This here article here is from NPR.org. Researchers say they found the surprising source of a key piece of Stonehenge. This is dated August 15th, 2024, written by Rachel Tribesmen. Researchers say they've tracked down the origin of Stonehenge's so-called altar stone, the monolith at the center of one of the world's most mysterious monuments. The purpose of the prehistoric structure in southern England has long been an enigma, though scientists have in recent years been able to determine where most of its stones came from. The upright sarsen stones have been traced to the nearby Marlborough Downs area in England, while the smaller blue stones have their roots in southwest Wales. The altar stone was the last odd one out, says Anthony Clark, a PhD student at Australia's Curtin University and the lead author of a new study about the stone's origins published this week in the journal Nature. Clark, who studies genealogy, the science of dating the age of rocks, has always been fascinated by Stonehenge in particular. He grew up on a farm in southwest Wales where some of the stones are from. The 6-ton altar stone, remember it's over 13,000 pounds, that's metric tons, which today lies broken on the ground, partially covered by two other stones that are believed to have collapsed onto it, was long thought to have come from South Wales, but research published last year effectively ruled out that possibility. Clark connected over email with Nick Pierce, one of the Aberystwyth University researchers who had worked on that study, and took him up on his offer to send over some samples of the altar stone for analysis. That involved examining the algae and chemical characteristics of each of the mineral grains that came together to form the sandstones, Clark explained. When you take this profile, this fingerprint, in a way, of the rock, we can forensically compare it to potential sources areas all over the UK, and we did that. It was strikingly similar to Orcadian Basin sedimentary rocks. That was surprising in no small part because the Orcadian Basin is in the northeast of Scotland, of over 450 miles away from the site of Stonehenge. When we first got the first kind of batch of data, I looked at it and I said, there's no way that this can be so distinctly Scottish, Clark added. So we did more analysis, and time and again it was just so distinctly not from southern Britain. It pointed towards it coming from the Orcadian Basin. Just remarkable. The findings suggest that roughly 12,000 pounds, 16-foot long rock somehow traveled hundreds of miles from Scotland to England well before the invention of the wheel. It was installed in Stonehenge sometime between 2620 BC and 2480 BC. So you're looking at close to 5,000 years. As Clark puts it, just driving from North Scotland to England is a relatively arduous trip these days. Spare a thought for our Neolithic ancestors, where the heavily forested landscape, rivers, bogs, and mountains, it would have been formidable, if not impossible, he adds. So how'd they get that thing down there? It's not clear why the stone was taken so far away, or how long the process of the journey took. There are a few theories as to how it made the journey. One is the vast walls of ice glaciers brought the stone southwards, but Clark says ice sheet reconstructions show they would have actually moved it in the opposite direction. He and other researchers think the most likely explanation is that it was brought to England by boat, especially since there is already evidence of Neolithic marine trading networks of things like tools and cattle. If so, he says, it would point to a rather advanced and skilled society. Such writing demonstrates a high level of societal organization with intra-Britain transport during the Neolithic period, reads the team's study. And boy, that's really something. I mean, look at these maps over here. It's an amazing distance. This is quite a long distance. I mean, we're talking clear from one end of the country to the other. You can see the highway here. I mean, how long this thing goes. If we look here, especially in Scotland, look at the rough terrain here. I mean, are we to believe that these Neolithic people, these folks that were so primitive that they hadn't even invented the wheel yet. I guess that we're to believe that these guys somehow either drug this 13,000 pound stone through the forest, these old growth forests and the mountains and all that, or as this guy says, well, they floated it down there. I'm not sure. I mean, how big of a boat would they have had to create? How big of a barge would they have had to create in order to get this thing down here? And even once they did get the barge delivered to the other end of the country, and that's a big if, they would have still had to drag it quite a ways to the site. I don't know. This whole thing, it to me raises a lot more questions than it answers. We're talking about a society that's nearly 5,000 years old, before the invention of the wheel. So we're to believe that they had the time and the resources to build a boat large enough to carry a 13,000 pound stone 500 miles to the south of the country, when they could have just as easily used one of the local stones. To me, it's almost like they're doing this just to leave a message behind, that it can be done. It's a way of demonstrating their advancement. That doesn't sound like something that an ancient civilization that was barely into farming, still mostly a hunter-gatherer, maybe a few sheep or whatever, they certainly weren't capable of exploiting the land like we are today, that they would not even had the technology of a wheel, but yet we're to believe somehow they moved this 13,000 pound stone 450 miles. It just boggles the mind for me. But yeah, like I said, take a look at these maps, and the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, I'll just go ahead and post a video on YouTube, and people can just take a look at how far this thing was moved. I did have one guy leave in the comment sections, they thought, well, it would have been from the glaciers moving down, but they're saying in the article that no, that's not correct, because the glaciers would actually moved it the opposite direction. So they've ruled that out completely. So you're left with one of two things. Either these guys drug this thing up and down these hills and mountains and through forests and swamps and bogs and everything else, or somehow they were advanced enough to build a barge of some kind to bring it down, but we really don't have, as far as I know, other evidence of these people being seafaring folks. Very, very strange indeed. With a lot of these Neolithic sites, it seems like we're given a narrative and then we're just told to believe it, and if anybody disagrees with that narrative, then they're a conspiracy theorist. To my mind, this new discovery just opens up a lot more discussion and raises a lot more questions than it does as far as providing answers. Until next time, this is UFO Warning, over and out.